What's quite amazing in the round is that you had only or mainly European investors.
I think in a way this testifies to the fact that Europe is finally playing quite a big role in this type of environment. That's to me great news at the moment. I think that's maybe a bit of a revival of small molecules. The gene therapies have clear challenges, and biologics usually only target one disease. Small molecules such as nizubaglustat actually have the potential to serve more than one disease. What has changed over the past maybe 15, 20 years, and even if it's a rare disease, you need to come with good data. It's no longer enough to say, hey, I treated a few patients, they seem to be doing well, it's a rare disease, that doesn't fly anymore.
Bienvenue to a new episode. I'm your host Philip, and on this show, we're interviewing the best Europeans in biotech to help you grow. Of the more than 10,000 rare diseases that are affecting 400 million patients, only 5% of them have a treatment. The European company Azafaros reached the headlines recently with an almost $150 million Series B to treat a rare lysosomal disorder with a small molecule. So I caught up with Stefano while in Basel. I didn't know him personally, but I've heard many good things, especially through his investors, Jato. We talked about the recent progress in treating lysosomal storage disorders. We also talked about Stefano's background in Italy and big biotech and why now is the best moment to build a biotech in Europe. So here's my conversation with Stefano, and please hit the like or follow button if you're enjoying it. So, welcome to the show, Stefano.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I want to start with basically what makes Azafaros quite unique, at least in my opinion. I mean, you've raised a massive Series B, almost $150 million, which is very rare in Europe. And at the same time, you've launched like 2 global phase 3, which is also very rare. So I'm just curious if you can just tell me how you feel about it, how it went.
Yeah, well, obviously it feels great, and it feels like a big reward for the team and all the work that the team has done in the past few years. It's not been easy. The market is selective, but if you have a good program with a good plan, then investors will reward as they did with Azafaros. And one thing I do want to mention, I think it's our lead asset, nizubaglustat, really comes from more than 20 years of research in the Netherlands, done at Amsterdam Medical Center and Leiden University. Professor Hans Arts, Stan van Bokel, and Herman Overkleft worked on a library of molecules, and so the nizubaglustat was actually engineered to have the features that it does. It's not a serendipitous find. So we feel the responsibility to take this to patients and make sure we demonstrate its efficacy and safety.
Okay, that's true. Yeah, and I saw that even when it was spun out, it was already quite advanced program.
Yeah.
And what's also interesting is that I think Biogeneration or the Fabian's early stage was very involved in the company creation or something. Can you go a bit more into this story of how it actually came about?
Yes. So I mentioned Professor Hans Arts. So Hans was at Amsterdam Medical Center. They moved to Leiden, and he's dedicated his entire life to lysosomal diseases and developing small molecules that could impact these diseases. And so, and he knew Edward van Basel at Biogeneration Venture, BGV, because also they had prior attempts to actually, develop companies based on this, which didn't pan out. And so ultimately, when he got to nizubaglustat and he realized that this was really quite a unique compound as a potential at that time, he went back to Edward, and BGV actually put the seed money for the compound and to start building the company. And this was in 2018. And then later, of course, Forbion joined in the Series A together with Biomed Partners, VC based as of here in Basel, correct? Schrader, and so that was the initial Series A investment, which took us all the way to basically starting the phase 3.
Yeah. And then the Series B, I'm curious because that's a big amount. I mean, I see it's Fabian Gross and Jato likes to do also big rounds like this, but it's quite a jump from the Series A to the Series B. Yeah, but at the same time, I guess it's what you need to run the 2 phase 3 as well. So, right, yeah. But can you give a bit of the background of the series of, how you...
Sure. So yeah, so the Series A allowed us to basically perform phase 1 and phase 2 studies. Phase 1 in healthy volunteers, which we showed safety, we showed target engagement. Specifically, we showed target engagement in the central nervous system because we had some of these healthy volunteers. We took lumbar punctures, and we could look at the cerebrospinal fluid (CSF). So we could see that the drug penetrates the brain and engages the target in the brain. So the phase 1 was successful. We then moved into a phase 2, where we actually treated some patients with GM2 gangliosidosis and the Niemann-Pick C. And this was, the core study was actually a dose selection study to really identify the right dose for a phase 3 study.
Yeah.
And obviously then patients after the core initial 3 months rolled over into an extension phase where all patients are receiving drugs. And now we're also looking at the clinical outcomes in an open label fashion in these patients. So all this really poised us to start the phase 3 studies. And we had basically moved forward. We had selected a CRO. We had initiated regulatory interactions. And we had approval already by the European authorities for the clinical trial. This was end of last year.
Okay.
So, the inflection points were there. And then, of course, to run 2 global phase 3 studies, you do need quite a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
So that's how the whole came about. Now, this was an oversubscribed, as you know.
Okay.
And that was because J2 and Forbion Growth believe in the potential of this drug. The asset actually could, based on the biology, could actually impact a number of different lysosomal diseases. And so that's why J2 and Forbion Growth decided to actually provide even some additional funds to expand to additional indications beyond the ones of the phase 3s.
I have several questions on what things I want to jump in on what we just said, but the first one is, I guess, as it's it's a rare lysosomal disease, I guess you also can run with quite a few number of, few number of patients, I guess, and you can run it a bit faster as well, I can imagine. How fast?
Yes and no.
Yes.
Faster, no. So I can tell you the phase 3 studies are, they will enroll 75 patients each, right?
And US, Europe, I guess.
It's US, Europe, and it's actually global. So we'll include Canada, Latin America, Turkey. We're actually also looking at India. So we're not running in Japan.
Okay.
So Japan, we've not explored yet. How we are doing it right now.
Yeah.
If by including Japan, we can actually get a faster registration there. So it's 2 global studies, and that's why we still have a quite an ambitious target in completing the enrollment. But 75 patients for a rare disease is actually quite a large study.
Okay.
One of the largest, actually, in the end, will be for these indications, or I should say, the largest of these indications.
But still way smaller than oncology or even
correct,
cardiovascular, whatever. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And okay. And actually, you mentioned also on expanding through other disease. What I saw in the pipeline, you basically have, it's a single compound, single asset, and very focused on the single asset. But then you're trying to get into several indications. That's correct. Yeah?
Correct.
Yeah. Correct. And why not expanding a bit, or having several assets?
So we do have another asset which is in preclinical phase, much earlier than nizubaglustat, and that also comes from the University of Leiden.
Okay.
And this is actually a clinically validated target in bone diseases, and so we have funds in our Series B to also take that asset to the clinics. So yes,
the lysosomal disease as well for the bone.
it were not disclosed. So but let's say could be. That's one. It's stay tuned indeed.
Okay, and going a bit deeper into the indication itself, because small molecule in the brain is always a bit. For CNS, it's always a bit tricky as well. Or can you just talk a bit about the disease itself? and how the compound, like what's the mechanism of action?
Yes. So and I think you can lump together in a way gangliosidosis and Niemann-Pick type C. So what happens, there's a missing enzyme in the lysosome, and that drives, this enzyme is supposed to break down, large molecules. So because the enzyme is missing or deficient, then you have an accumulation of these molecules that don't break down. So the compound actually acts as a dual mechanism of action. One mechanism is actually to reduce the production of these large molecules. So even if you cannot break them down, you still don't have such an accumulation. The other mechanism is actually by inhibiting a second enzyme in the pathway, and that has less of a mechanistic approach by simply reducing the production, as an impact on the downstream effect of the disease, such as brain inflammation and the synthesis of certain compounds that are toxic to the brain, and that's really what makes this unique. So, and these two different mechanisms, which are together in nizubaglustat, they both actually have been clinically validated because there are drugs that are either inhibiting one or the other already on the market.
Yeah.
And so our working hypothesis is that by combining the two, we'll be able to actually have a better efficacy and ultimately also better safety.
Okay, that's what I was about to ask actually, because I think how you differentiate, because some drugs are on the market. I'm not exactly which one, but I think on lysosomal you have quite a lot of competitors in Lysosomal disease. I think Actelion is one of them. I think
Actelion, former
they were great.
Actelion and J&J, yes,
is one of them, and I saw for NPC you had quite a few approvals as well. I think last year.
correct.
So I feel like that there is quite a few things.
Yes.
So how do you see it? I mean, except the dual acting mechanism, how do you differentiate, and can you actually have like a significant benefit compared to the guest?
That's all we expect. So there's been on the market for quite some time miglustat, which is the formerly Actelion, now J&J drug. Now it's generic, and we do share some similarities in the mechanism of action with miglustat. However, nizubaglustat is several orders of magnitude more potent than miglustat. And very important, it does not have an off-target effect that is typical of miglustat. Miglustat inhibits GI enzymes and therefore causes diarrhea in the vast majority of patients. It's actually quite a poor tolerability profile. We don't have that off-target effect in nizubaglustat. Therefore, what we have observed so far and what we expect is a much better safety profile. And a much better efficacy because it's a much more potent compound.
And I guess it's something that you take chronically, I guess.
Yes.
So it's
our nizubaglustat is being administered once a day, and we have developed a presentation of oral dispersible tablets. So these are the very small tablets that you put on the tongue and they disintegrate on the tongue.
Okay.
So also quite convenient.
Yeah.
Now, this is important because many of these patients actually develop difficulty swallowing. So this is more than a nice to have, organized presentation. Now, you mentioned some recent approval for Niemann-Pick C in the US, and also recently the CHMP provided a positive opinion to another drug. Our clinical study will actually deliver a much better data set, if positive, because we have actually an 18 months randomized placebo-controlled study, and none of the other drugs have such a solid and strong design, which has been agreed with the agencies as well. So
why not?
Why they don't have it?
Yeah.
It's a long story, so you should ask them. So because one drug was by orphan and their study,
Orphan didn't really work, no, right?
that's the one that didn't work, and then they went back with additional, real world data, and then ultimately FDA approved. And then the other one is based on a 3-month study only, placebo controlled. So that's why if our phase 3 is positive, it will deliver a much superior data set to what's out there at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Makes yeah, I like it. I like it. And I'm curious on because on one thing, I mean, if we zoom out a bit also on rare disease, it's not that typical to have small molecules for rare disease, at least in my, I mean, it exists, but at least for my, and what I hear more often is whatever. I mean, let's say the enzyme replacement, and then now more like gene therapy to fix some of the rare disease, and especially on this genetic. So how do you look at it, like from even not just Azafaros on the field, like how do you look at the small molecules in rare disease? Like,
I think so. It's true that enzyme replacement therapies is at what where it all started, right? And I was fortunate enough to be at Genzyme during the Cerezyme launch and so on, and Fabrazyme launch and so on. And that's, of course, a very straightforward concept, although, of course, it's not very straightforward to develop and commercialize and produce. And I think Actelion indeed was the first one to try to use small molecule to impact these diseases. And it was relatively effective, although being the first, it wasn't great, to be all honest, as I mentioned earlier.
it still is blockbuster drug.
I don't think it reached blockbuster, no, and because the safety was really not that great. So, and then gene therapy was the other big wish. And I remember back in the days talking to any patient or family, they want the gene therapy badly because it's a great concept as well. One shot theory, fix, and then it's done. Now, without going into it, the gene therapy is, it's not been as easy as one maybe expected. And so I think maybe that's a bit of a revival of small molecules. And there have been, if you think about it, a few recent approvals with the small molecules. And I think, again, it's not easy either, right? You still need to be brain penetrant and even manufacturing, which admittedly is easier than definitely much easier than gene therapy, but also biologics. Even small molecules have their challenges with manufacturing. But I have to say that at the moment, I think that's maybe a bit of a revival of small molecules, and people are looking at it because the gene therapies have clear challenges, and biologics have also one limitation. That biologics usually only target one disease. So if you do enzyme replacement therapies, that's that one enzyme that substitutes that enzyme that is missing. Small molecules such as nizubaglustat actually have the potential to serve more than one disease. So from a business perspective, that may help significantly.
Yeah. So and I guess from also CNS, like our brain penetration, small molecules still way superior to biologics. I usually still today, even today, like I usually start having some brain carrier or whatever.
Correct.
But I think it's still
if it works, that'd be fantastic. But yes, even small molecules sometimes don't penetrate the brain, right? So there are marketed drugs that only work on the visceral symptoms of diseases because they don't cross the blood-brain barrier. So, but it's usually easier with small molecule. If you have a library, you can find one that penetrates the brain.
So I guess that's also one reason why you guys are also going after, why the small molecule, why you're going after small molecules at the end. Like
yes, like I said, that's how it was developed. The researchers in Leiden actually looked at what was the one that was penetrating the brain and had all the other features. So like I said, we benefit of this like 20 plus years of research, and now we have the fortune and the privilege to bring it to the clinics.
That's it. And how much is what I'm also seeing again, still a bit on the industry trend on small molecules, I see a bit more like, let's say, whatever novel mechanisms of action with small molecules, whatever the protein degraders, and you have a few things that I think didn't exist, whatever, 10, 20 years ago, or at least it's recent, which is quite amazing that even small molecules, it's been whatever, 50 plus years that you explore, and that I kind of assume that we've explored a lot of it, but you can still find a lot of novel things.
Yes.
So how, in your case, like how much is it like kind of novel small molecule discovery, or is it you could have done it before? It just was like finding the right target and the right mechanism of action. Like,
no, I think you could call it novel, very much so. And the mechanism was described earlier, right? So inhibiting one part of the mechanism was inhibiting the synthesis of this large molecule. That was what Actelion did back in the days. That was indeed a serendipitous find, by the way. That molecule was initially developed as an antiviral. But then they realized it was inhibiting this enzyme, and they thought, maybe we could use it in Gaucher disease, and that's how it all came about. And then that led to a development of a number of these molecules that inhibits the substrate synthesis.
Yeah.
The unique thing about nizubaglustat, like I mentioned, that it also inhibits another enzyme which has an impact on the inflammatory part of the disease, which is very important. So, and actually, when you look at animal models, the other compounds are functioning maybe in one model, but not the others. Nizubaglustat is the only compound that was effective in animal models of both Niemann-Pick C and gangliosidosis. So that's why we know even from preclinical data that this is quite a unique. So in a way, it's not a novel mechanism, but on another way, we are bringing something new. And which for investors is interesting because, of course, you manage some of the risks because the mechanism of action works.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you try. Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay. Now, coming back to what you also makes sense to what you said is like you have drugs approved that show that it works, but if you increase, but they have a tolerability profile that is not that high. So if you can show that something works as well or more potent and it's more tolerable,
Correct.
You can expand your. Okay. Yeah.
That's the concept.
I like it. And then the kind of the next steps. You mentioned the phase 3 is 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have what interim readout, or is really like the result as a deal?
We don't have a planned interim readout at the moment. We could always add one with an amendment to the protocol, but at the moment we feel that that's probably the way to go, to have really a solid data point at 18 months and to be able to show and to demonstrate long-term effect of the drug, which is what we expect. We expect this to be a disease-modifying agent. So in a way, we want to see and follow these patients for 18 months to be able to say, look, we have a long-term effect. And by the way, even in the phase 2 study, we have patients that are stabilized for the first 12 months, which is already a great result in these diseases, but then they start improving after 12 months. So, and these are small numbers, of course, but what if you do see some effect like that, then we don't want to miss that by shortening the study to a shorter duration. So at the moment, we're looking at the 18 months.
Okay. So this brings you to like early 2027, something like this, or first half of 2027?
Yes. End of 27, we should have we should approach a readout.
Okay, because you started.
We start now. We plan to complete enrollment next year.
Okay, yeah,
that's last patient in plus 18 months. It brings you to M27.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay, and on the way, I'm curious on the milestones. Except just executing, enrolling,
yes,
doing all the clinical trial. But what's the next milestones?
So, clearly enrolling the study. Now there are what we need to do in the next 3 years. The first, second, third priority is enrolling the study. So the milestones are complete enrollment, and once that's done, keep patients on study and make sure we get enough patients at the end of the study. So, and we are in a very good place there. Now we are more and more sites being activated. Patients are showing interest. We actually receive patients' inquiry from a number of different channels. So we feel quite confident that we will achieve our goal to complete enrollment next year. Now, on the other side, we're also looking at some more strategic view with the additional indications. So, and we haven't disclosed yet, but we're looking at 2 or 3 different options of additional studies. And the idea would be to perform 1/potentially 2 studies to demonstrate with a clinical proof of concept that the drug could work also in additional diseases. So by therefore adding additional value to the asset. So, and that part is more strategic. We also want to speak to the agencies to understand what FDA and EMA would be more open to consider. We're talking to KOLs to understand where we can make the biggest impact in these additional indications. But next year we're gonna firm our plans and we're gonna get started with additional indication studies.
Okay, it sounds like you're busy. Oh, busy. And I'm curious on the company also. Again, when you're a single asset company, is always. You go after a different indication, but I'm curious on the plan also. What's the vision of the company? Is it like to build a bigger biotech, like where you were at whatever, Ultragenyx, Celgene, you said Genzyme, is it the goal to build like really a commercial company? And you could go commercial probably with the funding you have, or is it to...
So the funding actually is up until a data readout and filing. So we can complete the studies, including the
positive data, I guess.
So we're open to a number of options. And I think importantly, the option of actually being independent, it's actually on the table, because with rare diseases, the funds you need to actually launch are, within reach of an additional series or something. So at the moment, we don't have a set option. We're focusing on enrolling the study and execution. The funds that actually back us are quite resourceful, if I can say. So that's very much an option, like others on the table as well. So let's enroll the study, get the data, and then we can make a decision.
I think that's one thing that came up quite a few times on the podcast. Like in biotech, you want optionality.
Correct.
So you want to see fundraising IPO, even / fundraising. You want to have the possible exits. You want to have deals. You want to be able to go commercial.
Yeah.
I think you guys are probably in a pretty good position as well. So.
We are, and I see my job as a CEO very much to what you said, to keep options open, make sure I never have only one option, because if that fails, then you're left hang dry. I think the other thing that is worth mentioning, like I said, the option to launch and be independent is viable. It's not out of the reality. But also, it's important to emphasize that there's quite a number of companies on the other end of the spectrum, the M&A deal, that have committed themselves to rare diseases, and they do need to reach their pipeline because they have limited or no internal research. So there's a number of companies. It's not much more than a handful of companies that are fit that description and are very much interested in these type of assets. And many of these companies are companies that actually prefer to invest additional monies for de-risked assets, i.e. assets with a positive phase 3. So that's why we are in a very, very good place. I think I will be in a position to actually pick the right option together with investors, because ultimately that's their decision.
Yeah, of course. And I guess I want to talk a bit more on the rare disease market as well. But one specific question is, so what's quite amazing in the round is that you had basically, I think, only or mainly European investors.
Only European investors, yeah.
Only, and no American investor, which usually at this fund size, you have at least one US investor coming in. So I guess you also can tap into this bucket for next round as well. And why didn't you go for a bit more like US, or you looked, but
that's how in the end the round came together, right? I mean, we were talking to US investors, but then J2 came forward with to lead, and then for Beyond Growth. And I think in a way this testifies to the fact that Europe is finally playing quite a big role in this type of environment, and making sure that even European companies don't necessarily need a US fund to do such a big round. That's to me great news.
Yeah.
It was just, like I said, there was nothing specific about US Europe. I think just when J2 comes in, Beyond Growth comes in, then at some point it was hard even to find space for everyone who wanted to be in. So like I said, good problem to have. It was not anything specific that we didn't go after the US market.
Okay, yeah. And I guess at the end is also, it's a matter of fit, with buying personal fit, but also a matter of terms.
Like, maybe very much so, very much.
Which is not that discussed openly in biotech. The valuations are not. Are not disclosed usually, the valuations, versus in tech where people always disclose, okay, I raised at whatever, the OpenAI at 300 billion, and like,
true,
which is funny in biotech, is never really disclosed. I never, we can talk about this after, but I never understood exactly why, but I don't know.
Very good question.
As a sideline,
I don't know, yeah. But it's true, it's usually, we don't disclose, so very true.
I mean, not just for you guys, but like in general,
I don't recall that they disclosed the valuation.
But why is it? Is it for like to negotiate the exit afterwards? You don't want to disclose, or
That's a good question. You got me there. It might be because that drives clearly the expectation, and people know what you expect at the exit, so they don't want to disclose the cards. But that's a good question. I'll ask Jito and Forbidden Growth next time.
That's and on the to what I said on going back into rare disease, I think because I feel like rare disease. I mean, you mentioned, I guess, some big biotech, big pharma that are very interested in filling up the pipeline and are still very active in rare disease. I mean, I don't know who you're actually thinking about, but what I saw that some, I mean, the big guys, whatever, still the Sanofi Genzyme, that's the AstraZeneca, Alexion and AstraZeneca, and many more. I'm just curious on what's the sentiment on the rare disease market, because I feel like, especially on like ultra rare disease. I mean, I'm not talking about oncology, rare oncology, which is a bit different, but ultra rare disease. Like, what's the sentiment there? Because I feel like was like not. I don't know if it was a peak, but was the Genzyme acquisition and then like Alexion acquisition was like really big, and maybe like it fluctuated a bit, or what's the?
I think what happened was that there was a peak. It became a bit of a fashion, in fact, is the word. And so Pfizer had a rare disease unit, and GSK had a rare disease unit. Everybody had a rare disease unit. And then this big pharma realized that the business model doesn't really fit their business model, and the effort they need to make to do proper marketing and commercialization of a rare disease, it's not within their strengths, right? So they basically came out of the rare disease, ultra rare disease, like you say. However, there's still a few big pharma that have a rare disease interest and committed. You mentioned Alexion, AstraZeneca, definitely Sanofi, and Biogen as well has some rare disease interest. But then there's actually quite a number of mid cap or even some private companies that have that very much, that rare disease focus, ultra rare disease focus. And that's quite obvious, because for smaller companies, that actually is a very interesting business model, because you can actually do good business without huge investments. And it's actually quite motivational, I think, for the teams to work in rare diseases. So I think some people believe there's less of interest now, but what happened, it was really that a few companies that went into it then backed out, realizing it wasn't their business model. But there's quite a few companies. I would tell you, I could list easily more than 10 that have focused on rare disease, and they do need additional pipeline because they have limited or no internal pipeline.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and from a regulatory perspective, I think what you see is that there's still quite a few being approved. FDA now has made for a number of years, and now even under the new administration continues to message that they want to accelerate and look at rare diseases approvals in a different ways. Recently, they approved drugs without a control study, right, with an open label study, and they specifically said because in rare diseases you don't always need this. Similarly, the EMA does the same thing. So the regulatory environment is still very positive. And I would add, even from a pricing perspective, what you see in terms of pricing, especially in the US, is still makes it commercially very viable. So I think the business is there, and it's unique. Maybe what has changed over the past maybe 15, 20 years. And even if it's a rare disease, you need to come with good data. It's no longer enough to say, hey, I treated a few patients, they seem to be doing well. It's a rare disease. That doesn't fly anymore. In fact, we are running a gold standard study, if you wish, with randomized placebo control long term.
Yeah. And how much is it like a fashion thing in big pharma? I mean, they always love to go about this, and now it's like all the GLP-1s and was oncology. Yeah, there's a bit of antiviral was COVID. How much is that part of it? Like just of like big pharma following the trends and following each other.
Yeah, I think when big pharma went into it was a bit a trend thing, and that's why they walked out of it. And I think they did the right thing, not because there's nothing wrong. It's just that it was too hard for them to adapt their business model of large indications to very small indication. Everything is different about it. The clinical development is different. You need to, we know every single site that is in our clinical study. We know how many patients we should expect, and we know other patients in the country, how we can refer these patients, dealing with the PIs.
It's patient organization as well.
We work very, very closely with patient organization now for some times. And I have to say we're privileged because we have great relationship. We have a person actually dedicated to work with patient organizations. She's great, Gisela Lindhorst, and it becomes a true partnership because ultimately you're in it for the same. We want to bring a drug to patients. Patients want a drug that can help them, and as long as you're transparent and you tell them why you're doing certain things, even if it's sometimes things they particularly don't like running a placebo-controlled study. Patients don't like it. Or we explain them why we do it, and ultimately they understand, and they become, again, your partner, and they want to help you enroll the study. So, and then commercializing such a drug is very different than what you do for cardiovascular or oncology or something, right? It's again, there's a much more personal touch with the physician, and the decision to start treating a patient with a rare disease is a much more complex decision that needs a very different approach to commercializing. So it doesn't fit what these big pharma usually do. So I think it was a bit of a trend at the time.
And how, again, a bit not the challenging, but a bit also the as a background. But what I remember is basically when I finished my studies, which was not that long ago, I was in Boston and was basically at the time of the Genzyme acquisition. And I remember it was okay, the whole big pharma model is changing. The blockbuster model is gone. Now it's only a lot of rare disease and more the hundreds of millions versus blockbuster. And then we talked with one guest on the show was Joris from Alira. And we basically think, but now, almost the opposite happened with Keytruda. It was even blockbusters.
Yes.
This last year was 25 plus billion revenues. So is it at the end, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, is it 10 years ago, there was kind of a less opportunity to do blockbuster drugs. And so, we go more into rare disease, but actually what happens is that there's still a lot of opportunities. Of course, as a big pharma, you're chasing the bigger opportunities.
Yes.
Is it also a bit of this that happened?
Maybe, I think so, actually, because I think, look, nobody wanted to touch obesity until some time ago, and now everybody wants to be in obesity, right? I think you're onto something. I think, in fact, there was a bit of a how can I say, type of social responsibility doing the rare disease. We help the rare patients, a nice thing, which is true. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And big pharma wanted to be there, right? So, but then they, like I said, they realized this was too much for them, and additional blockbuster opportunity came about. So it was maybe a bit of both that happened, and yes, I think in the end, this is much better suited for a mid-sized company that doesn't want to build a huge commercial organization to market a cardiovascular drug or an obesity drug, and therefore it fits. But they have resources, they have the cash resources and the human resources to actually do this in rare diseases, and it makes much more sense.
And and one thing you mentioned also on the approval that is maybe facilitated or that easier. I'm curious on but then you mentioned you need to have good data and the pricing sometimes makes sense. I'm curious, can you talk a bit on the relationship between all of them? Because I feel in rare disease, quite a few biotechs, they have the approval, but then it just doesn't fly commercially, maybe because the data are not good enough or because commercial is harder than expected or whatever. Can you talk a bit about this, the relationship between them?
And as you know, my past is a lot in commercial as well, so I carry some scars on it. So I think again, what happened since the very early days of rare diseases, where, to be honest, nobody thought that this could become such a large investment. You came with like few patients treated, again some open label studies. People thought like, yeah, whatever, it's a rare disease. And payers did the same. Payers said like, I have bigger fish to fry. I have cholesterol lowering agents and rheumatoid arthritis, whatever. It's a few patients. Go ahead and get the price. That has changed dramatically now.
Yeah.
So from a regulatory perspective, yes, they do want to look at rare diseases in a different way, and sometimes they actually help you. And for example, in our interactions with the agencies, they always stress the fact that they will look at the totality of data. So we plan to hit our primary endpoints and go with a positive study, but the agency has signaled that they will look at all the data set, and like I've done for other drugs, they will potentially adopt flexibility in approving these drugs. However, after that, you need to deal with payers. And what has happened is that rightfully, many companies have tried to work on surrogate markers or try to work on innovative endpoints, because by definition, you have few patients, you have very little data on natural history. So you need to be creative around your clinical development. And that may work with regulatory agencies. Sometimes though, or oftentimes when you go back to payers and payers say like, this endpoint doesn't really tell me that you're impacting the clinical outcomes of the patient. So the pricing conversation becomes very, very difficult. And I think, and that's why I feel very confident about our program, because we, like I said, having a randomized placebo-controlled study, 18 months. So we're, you can't do any better there. And our primary endpoint is a clinical endpoint. We're not using a surrogate marker, or we're using a validated scale that measures ataxia in these patients. So with a positive phase 3, we can go to payers and say, we improve these patients' clinical outcomes on a longer term, and we've showed with a placebo-controlled study. And so the value that we will be, we'll have the tools to argue the value of what we bring to these patients, even with payers. And that has become more and more challenging, because payers now see more and more of these drugs coming, and the price per patient is high, which of course it's understandable, because it's few patients, you need to have a higher price per patient, but it has also a bit of a psychological baggage with it, that payers say like, oh my God, you're charging that much for one patient, and so on and so forth. So, but if you have good data with a well-designed study, then like I said, you have the tools to have that discussion. And therefore I'm very confident that ultimately with a positive phase 3, we should be able to actually get a premium price.
And I guess as a biotech / or even as a pharma, you want to have a rare disease which is not too rare either. I guess you want to have I don't know if you can call it a critical size of patient, but you want to still have enough patients to make the business case, basically.
Yes.
I can imagine.
So yeah, of course we run, revenue forecasts, and I think in our case, the fact that we can target more than one disease helps a lot.
Yeah.
Because maybe if you only had one of these, the commercial case would not be perhaps viable. But they are looking, other companies, at rarer and rarer indications, and you're now also hearing a lot about N01. So my personal belief, I think, when you look at like this super ultra rare, I don't know what we're going to call it, right? N of 1 or like N of 10 worldwide, you need to think of it different ways to make it viable to investors, or maybe it's not going to be investors, it's going to be a different type of funding, because that is impossible to make it viable commercially. But, with the current pricing environment and the type of epidemiology and prevalence we have for our diseases, this makes it actually a very interesting business case.
Because how many patients are we talking per year?
So,
say Europe, US, maybe.
The prevalence in Europe, US for Niemann-Pick type C, we estimate being about 1,000 patients US, 1,000 patients Europe.
Okay, so
it's not very, very. And for gangliosidosis, is about half of that, so about 500 in the US and 500 in Europe.
Yeah.
The other important things, perhaps, about
that's newly diagnosed per year.
This is prevalence. No, this is actually the actual prevalent population.
Yeah.
And it's important to note as well that also other regions which, the case is usually built around Europe, US. But for example, Latin America, it's a place where you have large countries, you have lots of patients, potentially maybe even a higher prevalence because of some founder effect. I haven't found any scientific data here, but it may be that way. But regardless, and those are also a good business opportunity, and companies, one after the other, have shown that you can build a strong business in Latin America as well. It takes a lot longer, of course, than US and Europe, but ultimately, and companies I've been at or other companies, they've all built some relevant business in Latin America as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so you can really go global. Again, and then it makes sense also for you. I was also one thing I was wondering is like why you clinical trial you go so global, let's say Latin America or India versus focusing on whatever EU5 plus US. But I guess that's one of the reasons.
So one of the reasons. One is to make sure we enroll the study in a reasonable time, but the other one is to build the knowledge in those countries so that once the drug is launched, then you don't have to start from scratch with having experience in that particular country.
And I guess even if the approval, I guess whatever Latin America, they will probably follow the decision of EMA and FDA. But if you have local patient data, and if I guess it makes also the pricing much easier.
It helps, and having the PIs knowing the drug already and how it works and how to use it. So and yes, Brazil follows quite a bit the FDA. There are also incentives in Brazil for rare diseases. If you file early, you can actually have some fast track. So the environment is actually very positive for rare diseases as well.
Actually, that's one thing I was wondering, but I guess you have also fast track already.
We have rare pediatric disease designation, so both Europe and US. So this has been recognized as quite an unmet need.
But I guess that's not. I mean, I don't know how easy it is to get, but I guess if you have a, let's say, a potent candidate in rare disease, I guess you get it quite easily. The fast track.
You have to show some fast track and orphan designation. You have to show some data, but non-clinical data is enough. In Europe, when you apply for marketing authorization, you have to confirm the orphan drug designation. So the bar is lower than getting the drug approved.
Yeah,
but it's not like as easy. You just say, "Oh, I think it's going to work," and it works. So it does take some work.
Although there's drug development at the end is still, but I guess it's just easier than to get it into like in rare oncology. I guess it's harder to obtain fast track in rare disease designations and
I would
have more ultra or rare.
Yes.
And on the pricing, I'm just curious because what you said also that payers now they look and there's more and more rare disease, which I guess if you look at the single rare disease, it's still a small amount. But if you do the cumulative on all the rare disease, I guess the amount starts to be much more significant.
Right.
I guess if you take just a rare disease bucket, then it becomes, I guess, similar to other like disease buckets. I guess not oncology, but some other like whatever. I don't know, CNS. I don't know how big is the bucket, but I guess you start to have similar like
yes.
I don't know the range. You keep to be hard on
that. Last I looked at it, the rare diseases altogether were still quite a small percentage of the drug expenditure in major markets. So maybe if you look at specific therapeutic area, maybe becomes comparable to all rare diseases. But at the moment, it's not that. This is becoming like 50% of drug expenditure. Last I checked was like single digit percentage. So like I said, it's more that you see so many that payers are now not so forgiving. And so they still want to see good data. They still want to see clear endpoints. They still want to see clinical outcomes. And therefore, it is more challenging. But like I said, if you have good data, good, well-designed studies, then you will achieve a premium price.
Yeah. I'm curious about it because we talk, and I have to ask, but we talk quite a lot on the podcast with some guests on basically where is the market opportunity. And basically there was kind of unanimous that most of the drug reimbursement is in the US. I guess for rare disease, it's also the case. So for you guys, I remember one was Abivax actually before the phase 3 data, which I think Mark de Garidel said think 70% of his market is basically in the US. That's also why you focus quite a lot on the US. For you guys, is that like a similar range? Or, I mean, I guess in patient population it's not, but in like, like a business opportunity, is it similar?
Yeah. So US is still, the leading market, clearly. In our revenue forecasts, we expect the US to carry majority of the weight. But Europe and other countries, like I said, do. And I think that's my experience when I was in commercial. What happens, you have US, it's bigger and faster.
Yeah.
Then you have Europe coming and it takes a bit longer, but then it delivers quite good results. So you can get a good opportunity. And then you can have Latin America. So, and other markets as well. So in a way, if you have the right commercial strategy, then you have a steady, countries that bring in growth, because then when US get to a point, growing becomes harder. And so that's where, if at that point Europe kicks in and then Latin America kicks in, you have a good commercial strategy. Now, things may change if pricing changes, and if, Trump has been mentioning most favored nation. And of course, the details of that need to be understood, and it's a bit unclear. But at the moment, we are in a good place because we have time to adapt to whatever will happen in the next couple of years, and then make the right decisions based on pricing, Europe versus US, if needed. So, and like I said, the base is always having good data, and therefore, I feel very confident about having those pricing conversations, throughout the world.
Like that. Talking with me, I think it's a good time to also, a good time to switch to a bit more personal. I mean, you talk quite a lot about your commercial experience, and before I saw you were at, you mentioned you were at Genzyme, you were at Celgene, Ultragenyx, so basically big biotechs, big US biotechs, but you were always on the European teams.
Right. And it's based in the US as well with Genzyme. It was a couple of years in the headquarters in Genzyme, in Boston.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious on, just maybe top level, some of the lessons you took from there, like, just really general question.
So there will be a long list. I learned so much. No, but maybe I can think of a few things. So first of all, I think from Genzyme, what was really valuable there was really this really venturing where no one else would venture, right? And very clearly with the initial Cerazime launch, nobody would think of market a drug for a few thousands of patients worldwide. And then they did. And Henry Termier, CEO at the time, the late Henry Termier, of course, had that vision, and he thought this could be done. And he did it. And he basically that started this whole thing. And so to really not being afraid to venture into places where, nobody else has gone yet, and take calculated risks, right? So that's one thing, not to follow the path of least resistance and the easy path. And then I
guess that's also where you have less, you have an opportunity and less competition as well, which.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And investments are not as high. So there's pros and cons. But it takes some guts to say, I'm going to bring a drug to the market for 5,000 patients worldwide. I can tell you, and Henry used to say this story all of me, that when he went to investors with that, investors said, like, you're crazy. You should change your strategy. This is never going to work. So he proved them wrong.
On Genzyme, please, because I read the biography of Henry Termier, which I think is an amazing book.
Amazing.
You read the book? I
did.
How much is it, like, the book versus your experience? How much is it, like?
It's quite there. It's Henry was really quite a visionary, and I think, and then I really have had the privilege to meet him, have meetings with him, and have dinner with him. I remember when I was in Greece and I was starting up the Genzyme affiliate there, was my first role as a GM. And he came specifically to formally sign the documents of incorporation of the new affiliate. And that tells you a bit how he was. He was like, he liked this like personal touch with the team or with the patients. And for somebody that at that time was leading several thousands people company, it's not so to be expected. So yeah, quite a relentless person, Henry. So I learned a lot from him, for sure.
So and then sorry, I didn't want to I mean, it was just a side.
That's okay. No, I think one thing that I remember about Celgene, first of all, an amazing experience. I joined Celgene and we were maybe 20, 30 people all over Europe. Within a few years, we were a few thousands. The company was, generating, I don't know, 1.5 billion in Europe alone. So quite an experience on managing growth. And I think one thing I learned there was that actually, I don't think we did anything very innovative around building the company. It was pretty traditional, if I can use the word, strong medical, strong marketing, strong commercial. However, I think we did it really, really well. And so it taught me that sometimes you don't need to necessarily be new, as long as you do things really, really well and you coordinate and you make sure people talk to each other and the teams understand the goal and embrace the goal, which was very ambitious. Anything we did was ambitious there. So it was a great learning experience. And like I said, managing growth, it's been a bit my mantra there since then, that you need to expect that growth will bring change. You can't say, oh, we're the same as we were 4 years ago here at Azafaros or whatever, Celgene. You need to expect change and manage that change. And because if you don't manage it, then it will go in a direction that you may not like. If you manage it, then it will go where you want to go. So you need to be very alert to that.
I like that, yeah. And Celgene, because at the end there was a quite focus on oncology, but at the beginning was more...
It was a hematology. It was hematology oncology. So we launched Revlimid in multiple myeloma and myelodysplastic syndrome. And then we acquired Abraxis with Abraxane, which was for solid tumors, that branched into solid tumors. But I think and then at the towards the end of my tenure at Celgene, also we launched into the I&I space with Apremilast for psoriasis. And then after that, it was acquired by Bristol Myers. So it was 100 billion. 100 billion, close to 100 billion. I think it was still a good deal for BMS because they brought in good pipeline, good products, steady cash flow. So maybe one of the last biggest of that size.
It is almost
I don't recall any of that size. Because then Seattle Genetics was 40 or something. So definitely not as big.
And you could have had, the Pfizer Astra that didn't went through, but that I think was would have been above 100 billion. But
would have been.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, it's a big one. And so you left before the
acquisition.
Okay.
Yes.
And then Ultragenyx, so you were the head of Europe then.
I was head of Europe. I did so when I was at Celgene, I was employee number 1 in the Italian affiliate.
Okay.
A lot of great experience. And then when I went to Ultragenyx, I was employee number 1 in Europe. So I started into a temporary office and started looking at permanent offices, hiring people and so on. There's a lot of fun, a lot of work. And that I actually enjoyed very much. I know some people may not because it's very tense and you're taking risks. But I like, building a team is like the most exciting thing that one can do as a manager. So I really enjoyed that very much. And Ultragenyx, I again feel privileged that I worked with Emil Kakis, who's somebody that really knows about rare diseases, has done it on his dime even, and the guy is really quite. I don't use this word lightly. He's a genius when it comes to clinical development of rare diseases. He really understands it and always has. And I talk to him on a regular basis, and I pick his brain all the time. And always within 5 minutes he comes with some idea that I hadn't had. So very, very interesting guy. I'm very, very fortunate to have worked with him, but to still have be in touch with him on a regular basis.
And Ultragenyx, they're in the Bay Area, and
yes,
yeah, in Marine, just next to BioMarine, right?
It's right next to BioMarine. So their regional office is in Novato, California, so north of San Francisco. They also opened an office in Brisbane, south of San Francisco, by the airport.
Yeah.
And they have a very nice building there in Brisbane. So yeah, quite a good company, interesting company now. So let's see what happens. They have a few new pipeline that should pan out in the next several months.
How big is it now? Is it 2,000 plus employees or something like this?
I don't recall how many employees, maybe around that number. So yes, it's a mid-size.
It's yeah. And but now I also understand, because I was curious on this transition that you made from, let's say, bigger biotech, already commercial, to now earlier stage biotech. But I guess this like team building is actually quite an entrepreneurial experience in itself. Like,
Yeah.
is it?
It is different. So there are some similarities, of course. You are on your own in an office. You show up first day. There's no one there. Maybe you have a laptop that was sent to you by mail. But of course, both in the Celgene situation and the Ultragenyx situation, you have a publicly traded company with, let me think, Celgene definitely with revenues already. Ultragenyx was approaching the time where they were having revenue. So, it's an entrepreneurial, but you have, somebody with big shoulders backing you out. This is different in that respect. And I think it's let's say it's not for the faint of heart, because you go through ups and downs and you have lots of challenges, and you don't have that backup of like the US generating revenues or something. Here is like, if things don't go well, that's it. So, but again, that's what I like. And I can see that there are people that actually thrive in such an environment. And there are people who are really not more cut for this environment, and they should go to a different type of company, and that's okay, and that's great. So that's why different people thrive in different environments. So,
And when you took the decision to join Azafaros, you felt it. This, like, you wanted to try, and you felt like you were ripe for. Yeah,
yes, definitely. I would say I was still enjoying very much what I was doing, but it was becoming a bit more of the same.
Okay.
And so I thought this is the opportunity to really shape the strategy from A to Z, and shape the future and my own destiny together with the team. And so, yeah, I felt this was the right thing. And also I could learn, and because it's not that you don't learn anymore, but after 20 years in publicly traded US companies, it starts becoming a bit repetitive. Here, I've had to learn a lot of new things, from raising funds to, really being, deeply involved in clinical development, which I was before, but more tangential.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. You seem to enjoy it.
I do very much. It is the best job in the planet. So
That's cool. And I'm curious on I mean, you talked about the story of the company, but can you tell the story of like how you got in touch with Azafaros and why you joined?
it was serendipitous this time. I knew socially, actually, somebody who was on the board from Biomed partner, being in Basel, and he was in Basel, and Andreas Valno, and he was on the board before, and then he left Biomed partners. That's why. But Andreas then went to JTO, and then he left JTO as well. And Andreas, he was a long time in Roche, and so we knew each other through my wife and so on. And at some point they were looking for a small Basel work, and they did the MBA together, my wife and Andreas. So just to be fully transparent. And so at some point they were looking for a new CEO. And so Andreas said, I know this guy, he's in Basel, he has an experience in rare diseases. And I also happen to know our chairman, Carlo Incerti, because Carlo was at Genzyme forever. And so we knew each other there. I think he actually interviewed me when I joined Genzyme. And so, of course, Carlo said, well, of course, I know Stefano, and that's how it all came about. I spoke to the shareholders, and they believed in me, although I had never been a CEO of a biotech, and so far so good.
So far so good. Yeah, I like that. I think I interviewed Andreas actually on stage with my previous company, La Biotech, which I founded, and I think but the interview was in Zurich. I want to say 2018 or something, but then and they were still in touch. And yeah, I talked to him recently for the what was the deal? I buy you know, well, he did the exit.
Yes.
Yeah. We talked about it. Yes, the amazing story and exit also. It's cool. Yeah, I like them. And I'm curious also because I mean in Europe, as you said, now if maybe we can look a bit at Europe as well as a sort of like and connect it to your personal story, because I think now you have a bit more like, let's say, the experienced CEOs who have done it. But I can imagine when you joined like 5 years ago, or even like a bit before, you didn't really have like the biotech CEO who is available in Europe, who has done it, who has raised, 100+ million, who has
Probably, yeah.
less. So I guess, yeah, at that time, I mean, you were also, I mean, I get just thinking on like you had to, I mean, or the investors had to take a risk as well on finding the best
True.
level CEO. Like,
True. And I think definitely I would say, because that is a chronic challenge, let's say, for a VC-backed biotech, that's talent at all levels. And it's funny, when I was talking about this job with the board, they told me this, and they said, look, this is a talent, it drives this market, so you shouldn't worry, even if it's a risky business, once you're in it. And I thought they were just, sweetening the pill for me and just making it, trying to motivate, but try to convince me. It's actually true, because, when you look at the number of biotechs that start every year in Europe, I'm talking only Europe, it's a lot. And many of them are in like France, Switzerland, Germany, and like that. And so if you think about it, all these biotechs will need to be staffed. And like I said, not everyone is actually cut for this type of environment. So, and I've witnessed it. I mean, it's not easy to find the right talent for this. So that's true, I guess, at any level. So perhaps at the CEO level as well. So
yeah, that's good.
good for me, I guess.
That's good for you. And I was curious also the why Basel, or why you're still in Basel. I guess that answers part of the question, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, the company is a Dutch company. My predecessor actually lives in Basel, so they set up an affiliate here in Basel in 2020, I believe.
Okay.
And then the Basel office grew without any strategic intent. It's just that there's so much talent available in Switzerland in general, and Basel in particular, that then we have actually, I would say, half of our team is based in Switzerland.
Okay.
But we do have a diffuse team. We have our chief operating officer is actually based in London. We have people based in Spain and the Netherlands. We have actually a few employees, and we take full advantage of remote working opportunities. I'm a big believer that, especially where you're a small team with such a focused goal, you don't need to be in the office every day, for sure. We do meet, of course, on a regular basis in person, because that's still important. But yes, that's how we came about the whole Basel presence.
Yeah, and I think that's also one thing we discussed on the show with some guests, like, and what you just said of like talent is a bottleneck.
Yes.
So if you hire across Europe, you just have access to a much bigger talent pool.
Correct. Many of the people that are based elsewhere wouldn't have moved to Basel, and so I would have lost that talent. So absolutely, I think it's a great opportunity to take advantage of that.
And I guess for you, you didn't want to move out of Basel to Naarden, to the Netherlands necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, the office, I inherited this office, by the way, and so there was no need to move. And so I did ask the shareholders, like, is there any reason to do it one way or another? And the shareholders said, look, talent is the most important thing. You have to hire the right people. So that's how we're going about this.
Okay, that's good. And before we do a quick fire, the last one is more like on your, even before you started in like, let's say, your career. So I think you did a PhD in Napoli.
I'm a physician. Yeah, I'm a physician and trained in Napoli.
But you grew up there? Or?
I grew up
in Napoli, and then okay, hi. And then you actually did your postdoc in San Francisco.
Yes.
And maybe quickly, but how was it, and how was the transition then to biotech?
Yeah. So as a physician, I had this dream of go to the US and work in research. And again, I was at the right place at the right time. I professor at the time in Italy said, I need somebody to go learn molecular biology, and that's you. And I said, okay. So I went to San Francisco. I was supposed to be 2 years there. I stayed longer, and then I became an adjunct faculty. And then I joined the industry that was really, again, serendipitous. I was looking for another lab, and I thought I would be a researcher for the rest of my life. That's what I was good at the time. I had been successful. But then I found out that they were, looking for somebody in a med affairs role and in an Italian company at the time. So I said, oh, well, let me give it a try. And then I spent 3 years there, and then I went to Genzyme, and I really understood that's what I enjoyed. I had a great time, great colleagues, wonderful business. We were helping people. And I thought, I feel that I'm doing more for patients here than I could do as a physician or even as a researcher. So that's why I found my calling. I was lucky as well, but you need that as well in life.
Yeah, it's a good one. Also, and the impact you can have. It's also. I mean, as an MD, you can maybe treat a few patients per year, and if you develop a drug, you can treat a few thousands of patients a year.
Right. And it's just, if you enjoy treating patients, luckily there's a lot of people who enjoy being physicians and clinics, but I thought that this is really what I had enjoyed most. So like I said, I found my calling.
Yeah, amazing. So do a Quickfire, which is basically like some quick, smaller questions and some smaller answers. And the first one was I had one about small molecules, but we answered this one. Maybe one who is one of your biopharma heroes, except Henry Termier.
Then next to him, I need to keep two names. One is Emil, which I mentioned.
Yeah.
Emil Kakis has really pioneered clinical development of rare diseases. Henry pioneered the business side. I think Emil has been really, his deep understanding of these diseases and understanding how you can address them. I'd also like to mention our chairman, Carlo Incerti, because he was at Genzyme for many, many years, and majority of the rare disease drugs that were approved at Genzyme were under his watch. So he's an asset to our company as well.
Yeah. Well, that's good. One thing Europe should do to promote more entrepreneurship in biotech.
A few, but let's say the capital markets are improving. I still think there's too much regulation, across different countries. So what happens then, you have a few countries that are leading the way. It's not a coincidence that Azafaros has a Dutch and French investors, because the countries are really helping. There are others. I think if they could streamline that type of capital market availability, and then downstream, deal regulations, that's also that, some investors have that baggage on their side in other countries. So I think that's one thing, if I need to name that.
Yeah, that's good. What's one of the widely held belief about rare disease amongst, let's say, investors or entrepreneurs, what is not true?
Not all investors, but some investors believe that this is no longer of interest for potential acquirers. And that's the reason why we discussed earlier, because some big pharma walked out of it. And so if you take a superficial look, then you say like, oh, GSK doesn't have a rare disease, so there's no longer interest. And it's just, there's an interest from other companies. So, but there's a lot of investors who actually understand that this is a very good opportunity still. Quite a few investors.
Okay. That's a good one. One mistake you made in the past 12 months.
In the past 12 months? Let's see. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I guess it was, I'm not sure. I think on the clinical trial, usually the mistake that I tend to do is that sometimes you need to get more your hands dirty into the operations. and I like it. I usually do it, but sometimes I have other stuff that, like closing the financing round or like a podcast. And so sometimes you need to know when it's time to actually get in the operations and work with the team and make sure the team understands what needs to happen and provide help sometimes, right? So maybe, that may be something that I have done in the past 12 months.
Okay. So the balance between
the balance between the two. And usually I err on the fact that I don't get involved because I think the team is great. The team is doing a fantastic job. But sometimes my presence actually can help.
And the details are still
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
The one new habit that you adopted recently.
One new habit I adopted recently has been to really have even more. I've always had ongoing conversations with investors, but I try to keep that going even more, because what happens sometimes, again, talking about operations, you get so sucked up by taking care of execution, making sure everything is okay, that you forget that it's good to keep them involved and keep them abreast of what's going on, of the challenges, the opportunities, the good news, the not so good news. And so I try to keep this as a regular touch point. Sometimes just, reaching out and say, hey, do you want to have a chat, and so on. So outside board meetings, of course.
So there's less surprise for the board meeting.
As surprises for the board meeting. Very much so.
Yeah. I think you told me it's this week now.
It is this week. Yes. Day after tomorrow.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe the last one, like one advice to young life science professionals. Finding your calling, I think.
First of all, do something you enjoy. Because if you don't enjoy what you're doing, there's no way you're going to do it well. So, and this is not new. I think Obama had the same. So I think, but it's a pretty basic, but pretty important thing. Do something you enjoy with people you can work with. That's the other thing. The asset, the company is important, the program is important, everything else. But the most important thing is that you actually enjoy what you do and you enjoy working with the people you're working with. If those two things are not there, then you can have the best asset in the world. Don't go there. So, and also things will come. And I've been in places sometimes where I felt like I'm never going to achieve what I want to achieve, whether that's career or something. But ultimately, if you're persistent and resilient, then things will come. The environment and Europe right now is really the place to be, I have to say. So things are very different from like 20 years ago when I was a young physician. It's completely different. So there's even more opportunities now in Europe than there used to be. So I think this is a good moment to be in life sciences.
And it's a great way to finish the conversation.
Excellent.
Thanks, Stefano.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Philip. This was very much enjoyable. Yeah. So we should do it again.
I'm impressed by Stefano's dedication to helping rare disease patients over his career. I'm also impressed by Stefano's transition to a CEO of a biotech and his execution so far. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the like, follow, or review button. Any of these actions will help give more exposure to the podcast to more people. And if you want to support the show even further, you can make a donation by clicking on the link in the description below. We also have plenty of similar videos on our channel, so please feel free to just check it out. I would also love to hear what you think, so if you could drop a comment anywhere you are, or shoot me an email at philip@flot.bio. Thanks so much for staying until the end, and see you in the next episode.